Good afternoon, friends. It's a real pleasure for us to discuss a very interesting and a very important book. It's called Women of Influence, and I'm surrounded by two of them. I'm surrounded by Rajni and Durga. Rajni is a very dear friend of mine, and Durga has been a professional and somebody we've really appreciated and seen her grow and evolve as a very strong and forceful individual. So, thank you very much, Rajni and Durga, for joining us at this Afternoons with an Author. Must mention that the Afternoons with an Author is done in collaboration with the National Digital Library of India, and there are several young women and men who are watching us on this program. Before we start the program, let me tell you about the person the woman of influence who's written this book. But obviously, she did not include her name in the 10 women of influence. Let me tell you about Rajni Sekhri Sibal. Rajni is the one person who is known, but I think ought to have been better known because she was the one who took the plug off the recruitment scam in Haryana, putting her own life in danger. And it's a danger in the present continuous. Let me put it like this. So we used to be very psyched when we used to see her, with bodyguards in the Krishi Bhavan. But then we realized that that is because she taken up a very firm stand against a very powerful political family in Haryana. So congratulations, Rajni, for facing up to that challenge, for living through it, and for inspiring an entire generation to face those challenges. Friends, we have this absolutely remarkable book. It's a book, if you pick up, you enjoy reading it because it's got 10 brilliant stories of 10 brilliant young women who've done remarkable work, remarkable contribution to the governance of this country. I'm joined by Durga Shakti Nagpal. Durga and I have also worked in the Krishi Bhavan. Incidentally, all of us have been in Krishi Bhavan.
Yes, yes,
Isn't that
yes,
what a
sir.
coincidence, Rajni? I
Yes.
mean, we've all been in Krishi Bhavan at the same time,
At the
and
same time, yes.
yeah, I mean, and we didn't really think it's a Krishi Bhavan show, but Durga came to Krishi Bhavan and she was the PS to the Honorable Minister, and we've had some great times together. But let's do like this: that let's invite Rajni to speak to tell us about what inspired her to write this book. Then we'll talk to Durga, and then the conversation will move. Over to you, Rajni.
Thank you so much, Sanjeev. A pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me. And hi, Durga. Hello, everybody out there. Um, Women of Influence is a book that was born out of COVID. Uh, there are a large number of books of this genre where people have written about themselves, mainly male officers, autobiographies, a little in the face about what I did and what I'm capable of doing and what I have done in the past. And somehow, women's stories had never got told. So the book comprises of 10 events, episodes, um, policy interventions in the lives of 10 extraordinary women who walked that extra mile, worked in the IAS, and made a huge difference, a difference that's lasting. uh, how it started, Sanjeev, is there was, as you know, the IS is a favorite whipping boy of everybody. So there was this whole conversation on TV because those days, because of the lockdown, we were glued to the TV to find out what's happening in the world outside. And there was a debate where just about everything under the sun got blamed on the IS. For example, if it's not raining, the IS is at fault. If it's not, so it just was one of those very, very acrimonious debates. I don't want to say who it was, but somebody was very loud and kept saying. And then my daughter turned around. And as you mentioned, our children have been through the trials and travails that we've gone through in life. They've seen what I've been through. They've seen what, as your children must have as well, and the kind of pressures we face in everyday life. So she turned around and they said, Ma, why don't you just correct the narrative? I mean, why is it that everybody keeps saying that the IS is, either not functioning or arrogant or not able to deliver or whatever reason? Um, because I've seen a totally different story. I've seen a different life. We've lived it. Um, that set me thinking. I'm a little reticent. I didn't want to write about myself, so I did the next best thing. I picked up these beautiful women who've belong to different generations, different cadres, different backgrounds, social as well as academic, but have one common thread. Each one has a certain element of integrity. Each one came into the service with stars in their eyes, thinking that, they would actually make things work and work for the country. Each one continued to do so quietly, diligently, at their own level, without going out to the press and saying, "Look, wow, look at me! I've done stuff that is so something to be recorded." And each one definitely with a lot of courage. So I just put them together, and Penguin, it's a Penguin publication. They wanted me to do two more, so this is the first of the trilogy. The next two books are also on the way. One is about both men and women within all services, not merely the IS. Um, those who've done that remarkable, extraordinary work in their lives. They're not biographies. I'm not saying that each one of my heroines
Actually,
is
yes. I
is
mean, so
has been a
because I
heroine
think
right
you've
through.
gone beyond that thing of, because it is not so much to do with the persons as such. It is to do with the
Personality.
situation, and it
Yes.
is that, and as she mentions in the very beginning, that those of us in the IS are fortunate to work in absolutely varied circumstances, in absolutely very very different, very very diverse fields. And as I was just talking to Durga, it could be now she's into nursing education and pharma and into health. And earlier she was into geographical indicators, and before that in the agriculture. And then her she's just finished about, I think, one fourth of your tenure. Okay, Durga, tell us, how did you feel about getting your name into this Women of Influence, and uh, how was the process of interaction with Rajni? I think that's very important because it's a very interesting work, where I'm sure the two of you have interacted with each other. So can you tell us about how you felt when Rajni ji approached you, and how did this process of your narrative get built up?
Uh, Good afternoon, sir. Good afternoon, ma'am. Thank you so much for having me here today. And it's a pleasure that I'm getting to see both my mentors at the same time, talking to them on the screen. Sir, you've been like, I've been a probationer to you, and then I was with you in the agriculture ministry, then back in Lavasna, and with ma'am, I worked too. So first of all, it's my deepest honor to be here. Thank you so much for today's invitation. And coming to your question, sir, when ma'am spoke to me about the book, I was really surprised because ma'am has a very gentle way of talking about anything. So in her, usual iconic style, she said that she's planning to write this book and it's going to have stories of women authors. So I thought that क्योंकि मैं मैम के साथ साथ में काम करती हूँ एग्रीकल्चर में, तो इन्होंने यूपी में कोई भी काम होता है तो लोग जूनियर्स को ही पकड़ते हैं, तो मुझे लगा कि मैम मैम
You
को
thought
कोई
it's more of an assignment rather than a.
I needed this for this. Huh?
तो
Okay.
मुझे लगा मैम को कोई यूपी कार्डर से कोई सीनियर ऑफिसर, लेडी ऑफिसर चाहिए होगी अपनी स्टोरी बताने के लिए. And I thought that ma'am is going to say to me that please find 2-3 officers for me. So, but I was really
So
surprised when ma'am said that नहीं नहीं, ये तो तुम्ही को लिख के देना है मेरे को, and it's going to be a story about you. तो I was really surprised. मैंने कहा कि मैम मैंने तो कभी कुछ लिखा ही नहीं है आज तक except the UPSC exam. उसके बाद मैंने लिखना है वो सब छोड़ दिया. I have no knack of writing, and I'm really touched by the fact that you find my story worth including and having people read about it. तो मैम ने कहा कि नहीं, ये मैंने बहुत सोच विचार करके तुम्हारा नाम इसमें रखा है, and you need to tell me about your journey. And what I particularly liked about her style of writing the book was that it was not just about a certain episode in the career of an IS officer, of a woman IS officer. She wanted to start from the beginning, how that person grew, what was her childhood, what was her upbringing, what were the kind of values that she was given by her parents, what were the touching moments in her life that perhaps manifested in a bigger way when she grew up in her career. तो मुझे वो चीज़ बहुत अच्छी लगी because that made my narration and writing experience very easy because I just had to write about what I had underwent as a child and during my growing years. And she was very, very supportive. And because we worked together, we've discussed so many matters of dairying and animal husbandry together. That was what ma'am was looking after. We used to have so many rounds of coffee in her office because as PS to the minister, I was also looking after these subjects, dairying and animal husbandry. So we've had so many rounds of conversations. I think we really understood from each other what we were looking for. So the whole journey became very exciting and very enjoyable. And I'm very fortunate to have found place in ma'am's book.
Yeah. So you were
Rajni,
talking
there's
about the
going to be a
process.
comment, on our YouTube channel. It says, "Excellent, Rajni is a living legend." So, I mean, we've already started
That's so
getting these
sweet of
comments.
you to say that, Sani. But what I really wanted to share with you was the process. You asked for the process because
Yeah.
I got about 62 such, with what she said that ma'am asked me to write. I also asked people to speak. I also, send a dictaphone, talk to me over the phone to describe what they thought were areas in their lives that they've done very well. And I had 62 such notes, basically bullets from 62 different people. And then I read through them, sifted them, went back to the place where the event occurred, uh, looked at newspaper records if there were, talked to people who were there, talked to the public at large, and found out whether or not what is claimed to have happened, actually happened. And that's how we picked out, I picked out these 10 different people. Uh, Durga was, of course, one of them. And I built on those bullets. I had to, of course, I remember she must be recalling that I sat up and asked about her father, and we talked late into the night about what her mother would say, and things like that, and just then wrote about the whole event. But there were occasions where there have been taller claims that I did this and I did that, and I one point went down to the ground and found that not really. So one had to leave those out. But of the 62, I mean, there are at least another 12 or 13 worth publishing. And you can't, and why women is a question I get asked very often. One is, of course, women's stories don't get told. I know these women would have never told their stories had I not put it together. Because a lot of them kept saying there were people like who just said, I don't want my name there. I mean, I'm only talking about my work. What were the problems, what were the issues, how I workshop the solutions, but you don't have to talk about who I am, which I thought was very different from the other books that are out there. uh, so I do now when I do the second the second series that's coming up now, the second book in this trilogy. I would have some from my shelf, but I'm also looking for new ones, new stories. Yep.
So
So
this
that
is
was
how. So I mean, it must be a very difficult task. I mean, sifting from 62 to it's almost like being in a UPSC interview. You are sort of taking, selecting some, or and doing the other thing.
I
But I
also
think
made a few not some people were not very happy not being included.
obviously,
So
obviously,
that was
sure.
also there.
So I
But
think let's look at another aspect, Rajni, and that is that each of these stories has led to some institutional change in the way things were working. In fact, even in Durga's story, what happens is that prior to Durga's suspension was very easy for state governments. I think after Durga's suspension, and in fact, that thing also comes out very clearly that although she was being suspended for her activism, insofar as the sand mafia is concerned, the reasons were given very different. But after that, it led to a situation where suspending an all India service officer is not as easy. So, Rajni, can you also share with us that just as this thing led to an institutional reform here, perhaps you could share with us also that
a
from the
few
other
others.
stories, which are the major institutional changes that have happened? Maybe you could start looking at stories, or maybe I can start asking you that which from, for instance, let's talk about vaccination or let's talk about health. So the interventions which have been made in the health sector, that individual intervention, how has it impacted the larger governance system of this country.
Well, so yeah, you're right. In fact, there were institutional changes, and that's why these are stories worth telling. For instance, let's start with the one you picked up, the health, the polio. So 2011 was the last year that we ever had polio in India, and we've never looked back. I mean, we don't have polio anymore. So some of the changes that were brought about with that were, of course, the manner in which the vaccines are now being procured. The fact that we don't merely look at the World Bank for our funding, for our internal requirements. The fact that we do not distinguish between two different schemes to ensure who fits in where. So when you read the book, you'll understand what I'm saying. We look at the Nali Kali, Anita call. She's no more. So now, for
Yes.
example, there were some people I've never met. Durga I knew because we worked together, but
Yes, no, in
Anjali
fact,
Paul.
Anita Call's story is a very fascinating story.
So Anita
Just for
Paul.
the benefit of readers, let me also share with them that, again, she was able to bring about such a transformation. I mean, trusting the teacher. In fact, I must mention that, right now the Mantrana debate of the DAV college is happening at the Azim Premji Foundation, where exactly some of the thoughts which Anita Call had, about trusting the teacher to develop the syllabi. And I think that is a very, very important aspect, that some or the other, the transition in governance has to happen where we begin to trust the grassroots worker, the last mile, you know. And after Rajni has spoken, maybe we'll ask Durga about, is it actually panning out in the health department of UP, because she's currently there. But after you've spoken on this, on Anita calls, putting the teacher as the center stage in the entire pedagogic movement. So you could elaborate more on this, perhaps.
So one was that's Anita Call I never quite met because she passed away 2 years, 3 years before the book was written, and
Mhm.
so a lot of what I had was from material written, that was there in the public space, and by talking to her husband, her son, and trying to understand her persona. But the lasting effect that particular episode left was that Nali Kali basically means learning with joy, and
Mhm.
joyful learning is something that is now being talked about. That how the child, besides the teacher being center stage for curriculum, which is very central to the Nalikali experience, the learning for the child has to be not merely age related, but as per the child's ability to absorb in a joyful manner. It has to be joyful. That's the takeaway from there. And of course, the Right to Education Act, if you remember, is something that Anita drafted. And the thought for the right to education is there in the story about 5 years prior to the actual enactment of the act. So it's there in that story that is there. I've just got the book right here in front of me. If you look at the very first tale, now it's a episodic. You see where there are policy interventions, they last for longer. But episodic events, like the one in the cottage industry, the first time computers were
Yes.
introduced to cottage industry, is an episode. It's just basically how people rioted and said that we do not really want. They went on a strike.
No, but I think in that
It's
story, the other
institutionalized
aspect is also about the mental strength to negotiate. I
to
think of
negotiate.
equal importance, more than the computerization, was the aspect that, look, you have to call the bluff. So it was
Absolutely.
basically a mental strength, which was on display both sides. And finally, they said, "Acha, kuch to kar do." Give
The
us something
negotiation.
at least, to go about.
Yeah,
It's a good
true.
negotiating. In fact, I think this
Negotiation
will also
skills.
be a good case study insofar as negotiations is concerned. But Durga, tell us, has the nurse or has the primary caregiver, the ASHA worker, has the uh, do you find a change? Do you find that they're actually getting more empowered? Is there a visible change in the health sector in UP? What do you feel about it?
No, definitely, sir. There is a very welcome, very huge change. Not only, I would say, on the ground, but also in the perception of how we talk about ASHA workers. Earlier, they were a part of the system and they were performing a certain duty. But now there is a sea change in which people view them. as very important role players in the healthcare system. Perhaps they were at the right at the bottom of the entire system. Right now, they're the most important workers, and that's because of the kind of contribution that they've been able to make, particularly during COVID, and then during increasing the number of institutional deliveries, decreasing the diseases that happen to newborns, more vaccinations. Or that whole scenario at the rural level has changed, and all the parameters, all indicators have improved. That's been because of the ASHA workers. They're a huge force when it comes to the rural sector. And what is particularly encouraging is that they are actually respected a lot now by the rural folk. That yes, आशा दीदी हैं तो जो ये कहेंगी सही बात कह रही हैं, इनकी सलाह माननी चाहिए. वो परसेप्शन में भी बहुत फर्क आया है. उससे उनके एफर्ट्स में ज़्यादा रिजल्ट्स निकल के आ पा रहे हैं.
You see, before I ask Rajni to speak, you see, one thing which women officers have done much better than men is their ability to involve the colleagues and to involve the grassroots workers. I think there is I mean, that is one certain aspect because in each of these 10 stories, the connect which these officers have had with their staff and with the larger public has been very good. So, Raji, do you think it's easier for women to connect with grassroots workers, or do you think there is a gender issue here? Do you think men are slightly more, rule bound, tie bound, and more sort of hard bound in their approach? If I could ask, in general.
I think you're pushing me into an area that I don't want to talk about because honestly, but let me give you my honest opinion. Honestly, I've always felt that gender, your class, your caste, your background doesn't really define you. What defines you is who you are. So, as I've said in the book itself, in my author's note, you can have a woman who's not frightfully sensitive. You can have a man who's the most sensitive person going. So it depends on who's out there. But by and large, of the 10 women that I have spoken about, because they're really the leaders, they have actually had that ability to connect. And you're right. So if you look at that fourth story about death in police custody, I mean, that STM, the young STM, would have been in serious trouble had the public not been with her. The striking, the power sector employees had not been with her because people were willing to actually stone the police and the thana at that point of time. So because she was able to garner support and they felt that she was with them, and was helping out everybody all through the night. That's another episode that proves the point. But also in terms of colleagues, I mean, you're starting from Otima's story, where her own driver is the one who actually navigates through the war in the 1965 Pak War, and takes her through taron ki chhaon mein chalte chalte hain kind of thing. That you need to relate to it once you read the book. Uh,
Yes.
you'll understand what I'm saying. Every person becomes important to the protagonist. Whether it's the public at large, and of course, she had that factor where women from across different villages would actually walk for miles together to come and just look at her. They would come and sit in her office and feel empowered by just saying, "Oh, there's a lady collector." The first lady collector of Bikaner. So there is that.
I know there are certain things which only she could run. For instance, only she could have told women to take off your
Take
gungat
off the
and
gungat.
come
Absolutely.
on and speak.
Absolutely.
It's not. I'm so. So I think in many
Absolutely.
ways there is an added advantage which
Ji.
women have
Ji.
because of the ability to connect. Because of the ability
Ji.
to connect, and men tend to be more. In fact, there is a statement in your first thing when you say that even the officers were designed as sort of male preserves. I mean, the chair, the formidable thing. I mean, the entire thing which many of us have is to impose, is to give the aspect that here is power, here is power for the sake of power. Whereas
Yeah.
with the women, I mean, even the way the offices are designed. In fact, I must mention that you see, men are so reluctant to put the photographs of their wives and children on their table. Uh, it took me a long time before I started doing it. After having seen a lot of my women colleagues do it, it was only after I'd become additional chief secretary and somebody actually gave me a photo of my family. I had to look like that, but it's not something. But where I've noticed that a lot of my lady colleagues, they had the pictures of their parents, of their children, of their husbands, the whole family. So the family becomes a part of the office space, whereas men have tended to regard these as two separate things. I mean, so we've tended to regard the personal and the professional in very, very different compartments.
It's
So I think
also
maybe
because it's also because, Sanjeev, the work-life balance. Uh, all of us have to
you've
be.
written this. You've
It's
written this.
more difficult for the women because you are the one who gets called. My homework's not done. You're the one who gets called. Your son is fallen off a mango
Come on, I
tree.
have attended all PTs.
So all that, yeah. So
No, no,
that
I
work
get
life.
the. No, I
Sorry.
think it's very important. I think another point which Rajni has made is that a lot of times the bureaucracy is not recognized for some of the very important changes, legislative changes that we brought about. I mean, the RTA is just one example. The RTE is one example. There are many other instances where IAS officers and other officers have also done. You also spoken about the interventions in Naxal areas, Rajni. So can you tell us, shed more light about this on how development and law and order, and how sometimes we make such a fetish of law and order, and there is also that concern. I mean, she felt so shattered when her escort party got
Yeah. Yeah.
killed in the process, and so I mean, you can share your insights from that, and then we'll probably go back to Durga because she works uh, in UP, where again the law and order situation is a major challenge at times.
So may I just read a short excerpt from something called "The Development Despite Red Violence." This is a
Yeah.
story about Malini Shankar in
Mhm.
Maharashtra, and she was the CEO of Zilla Parishad at Chandrapur, which is an
Now,
Naxalite
what
affected.
page is this, Rajni?
This is
So those of
page
our
116. 116.
116. Okay.
Yeah. So Malini decided to stay the night at Gar Chandrachur. The sudden knock on the guest house. Now she's actually gone out for a inspection, and she hears a sudden knock on her door around 8 p.m. She was on an inspection tour to Jivati, the last village of the district on the Andhra border. Jivati was situated in Rajura Taluk, amidst a thick forest where you couldn't see human beings for miles. On her way back, as the sun went down and grew darker, Malini decided to stay the night. The sudden knock on the guest house door startled her. A strange sound in the Naxalite belt was enough to alarm anybody after dark. Who is it? She asked nervously. The police. Please open the door. Malini peeped through the keyhole and she saw that a posse of policemen was indeed standing outside the door. Or could it be the Naxalites dressed up in police uniform? She thought. All the stories of encounters Malini had heard about since she joined the CEO as CEO played up in her mind. Which police? Where are you from? Which Thana? She asked. There's been an ambush. It's urgent. We need to talk to you, madam. But I don't know you, she said. We will speak in the morning. Bobade here, ma'am. A contingent from the Maharashtra police is standing here with me. They want to speak to you. Please open the door. Something terrible has happened. Malini recognized the voice of her faithful driver, Milind Bobade. She peeped through the keyhole to make sure that it was indeed him and unlatched the door. Bobade walked in with the inspector and six other men stood before her, crowding the entrance. Madam, the jeep carrying your escort party was ambushed on its way to Jandur. They tried to return the fire but were outnumbered by the Naxalites. Five of the six men died before we reached the spot. We found only one man still breathing. We brought him here to the healthcare center, but he is not in a good state. He may not even last the night. Could you please record his dying declaration? Now, this happened uh, one night. This is her escort. And 2 days later, a minister came down from Mumbai, and asked her, the rural development Maharashtra minister came to the office from Mumbai. He was aghast to find her posted there. He said, "Which idiot posted you here?" She looked at him calmly and responded, "The government, sir." "Well, the government must make amends then," he said with a laugh. "You, a young girl from Tamil Nadu, all the way on your own in Kalapani, because that's what the place was called. That's not fair. And why did you not protest when they posted you here? Let me go back to Mumbai and I shall transfer you back immediately." And she said, "No, sir, please do not. This is where I want to work. This is where I will work until my tenure is over." I don't know how many people would do that. Believe me, I mean, I still get, when I heard her tell this story to me, um, I had my hair stand on end. They still stand on end. Because when you see five people dying, one died the day later, and you turn around and say, "No, I need to work my entire tenure." And she worked till the end, and she did a tremendous job there. So these are, as I said, I'm not saying that all these 10 women did brilliant things at every juncture of their career, but I picked up those events and episodes that
Yes.
need to be told. That where they really excelled.
And I think it's very significant because it makes us all think about both the opportunities and the challenges, and also tells us that strength is all in the mind. It's the strength is in the mind, and that's exactly what I think Durga also must have felt during the most difficult times that she was facing. So tell us, Durga, about how because about mental strength versus physical abilities, and how do you, as a young officer, look at these situations? How do you see the? I mean, how do you envisage yourself in situations like this?
Oh, indeed, sir. It's a lot about mental strength, and it's something which is needed day in and day out, because our service and the kind of duties that we perform, they are so challenging. Of course, because of the kind of plethora of activities that we are doing, and the kind of impact that we have on the life of a common man, it's bound to be challenging, and it will require a lot of mental courage to stick to your principles and values. You have a big team and they're all working for you. It's also important that you keep them motivated, because it's very easy that they may get dissuaded and they may want to walk their own way. That requires a lot of mental strength too. So the events that led to the suspension also were particularly such that one had to be very strong, not only physically but emotionally. The raid hours were very uncomfortable. They started in the middle of the night at 2 o'clock, and no one knew that the suspension is going to happen, or the team down the line is going to be reprimanded. So just to think of those duty hours, they were very uncomfortable and they were very risky. So there were so many people, the police constables, the revenue machinery, the patwari, the tehsildar, the kanungo, who used to accompany in the teams in the middle of the night. And there were threats, there were physical attacks that happened every night. And there was always this risk of not being able to come back home safely. Yet everybody decided to go every single day for the 3 weeks of continuous raids that were conducted in those areas. I think it was because of the kind of thrill, the kind of satisfaction, the kind of impact that you are able to create. Even the smallest functionary in the system is able to make a huge impact by catching hold of a man who is illegally dredging sand and then adversely impacting the life of a villager, spoiling his agricultural fields, threatening his livelihood. So that small functionary of the system is able to save the livelihood of a poor man. That is such an incredible satisfaction that it's something that pushes you out in the middle of the night. Your family supports you and says कि नहीं आप करो, आप जाओ, आप चिंता मत करो, we are there, we are praying for you and you do your duty. तो उन सब लोगों को साथ में लेकर के चलना वो एक बहुत ऑनरस टास्क है. It requires a lot of mental strength, but then I think when they all connect with the overall vision, the overall goal that has been set, the journey becomes easy.
No, really, Durga has made a very valid point. Rajni, tell us also about the Chief Secretary of Arunachal, because, in the sense that her parents never thought that, what Chief Secretary they thought, even being a collector or even being a revenue official was something great. So, this is again a very fascinating story of the first Mishmi tribe. Am I right? She was the first
Mishmi. Yeah,
Mishmi,
she's
the
the
first
first girl
Mishmi,
of the Mishmi tribe to
first
become.
girl of the Mishmi tribe to become the chief secretary of Arunachal. And especially because some of us were fortunate that we are not the first generation learners, or even in her case, of course, her grandfather had been the interpreter. But then, tell us about the story of this Mishmi girl who became the chief secretary, and what is it that you found most fascinating in her story, Rajni?
So this was a development story, and it continues because getting orchids from Arunachal,
Yes.
finding rice, which a variety which actually needed to be brought to the world outside, both the yellow and the black kind of rice. She began that, but what you're talking about. May I read that part of it?
Of
Uh,
course. Of course.
it's the story is called "Flowering Success in the Land of the Rising Sun," page 181. Get off that stool, Oyayo. Oyayo was the name for the child, huh? Come right down, right now. Do you want to hurt yourself? Emily Dolly had a shock as she looked up from the shawl that she was weaving. Now, this is actually Shakuntala's mother, you know,
Mhm.
the lady who became an IS officer later. And she was weaving her own shawl. And through the window, she saw her daughter standing on a rickety old stool in the middle of the courtyard of their home in Sisibargaon in Dhimaji on the northern bank of the river Brahmaputra in Assam and near the foothills of Arunachal Pradesh. Let the poor girl be, said her father. And what is Ohio? Your daughter is all grown up now. Call her by her real name. What a beautiful name she has, Shakuntala. L.K. Dore said with a laugh. Ohio's Aho, my daughter will always be my little, my own Ohio. Yes, but she's practicing hard for her interview for the civil services. You will see. Soon Ohio will be an IS officer and the first girl from the Mishing tribe to actually be an IS officer. I know she has these lofty dreams, and you, her father, have been encouraging her. But I don't understand how her oratory skills will improve her, making her. The mother has
Yeah.
absolutely no faith that her daughter
No
will be
faith in her,
anything.
but
Yeah, none.
it also, there's one other point here, Rajni. You see the polyglot skills which she has, and the number of languages that we pick up in India. It's so
Yes,
normal for us to pick up three or four languages, and in
yes.
her case, I mean, she'd picked up Assamia, she'd picked up her own language, she'd picked up Hindi, she'd picked up English.
Hindi,
So I think this
yes.
is a great advantage that we all have it, and we don't even realize what a great advantage it is. I mean, all of
Yeah.
us in India have this great advantage of knowing at least three, four, five languages. And for people like, for me who got posted from Punjab to Bengal and from Bengal into Darjeeling, I mean, Gorkhali, Bengali, Hindi, Punjabi, Urdu, Nepali. So it's a wonderful story, and this is really remarkable. So she's trying to declaim in four languages, and her mother is telling her, why are you trying to be a polyglot? A polyglot. You
Absolutely.
better
How
get
is it going
married,
to help
have a
you?
few
Yeah.
children, and rear a few cows. So
Yes. She wants her to get married and just rear a few cows and have lots of children, uh,
yeah.
but fate has something different for her daughter, who actually became the chief secretary, the first chief secretary first woman chief secretary of Arunachal.
The other interesting thing for my readers is that this book and the stories are not just about women and their influence. It also is a sociological narrative. For example, if you want to know about all the tribes which are there in Arunachal, you will find a reference here. If you want to know about the number of subcastes or subsects or the way women used to live in Rajasthan, you will get an inspiration here. If you want to know about what life is in rural Punjab 30 years ago, you will get to know about this. So do not for the readers who are still in the process of selecting this book, I would say that when you pick up this book, you get a real insight, not just into women of influence, but also into governance, also into the way departments of government are run, also about interpersonal relations between government departments. And one other remarkable thing which comes up is that there's a lot of good work which is done by grassroots workers in government. which doesn't get highlighted. I mean, every driver in this story, every Tehsildar in this story, every BDO in this story, every DYSP in the story, and these are not all India service officers. But in all the 10 cases, all the 10 protagonists have brought out this fact that it is not by themselves alone, but it is by working in a team that they've been able to
Absolutely.
achieve what they've been able to achieve. Back to you, Rajni, because you are the author of the book, and you could read some more, or you could share with us about, especially because there's that very sensitive story about human trafficking that you brought out. I think that's another story
Yeah.
which I think needs a much greater, I think more people need to hear about the problem and about the structural ways in which a protagonist tried to address it.
Right. So Bhavati, I think, is a particularly sensitive person. I met her just once, and I knew her for just that one meeting. And then later, of course, when I talked to her, I found that she needed to be in the book. It's all thanks to her. She somehow, oh, I think I need to read that bit, so that you understand what struck her. Um, and give me a minute. This is page, yeah, so page 215.
Mhm.
213, sorry. Uh, Bhamati, a
Yes.
deep
Mhm.
transformation took place in Bhamati's life the first day she visited a brothel in Delhi. Now, please understand, there is this whole feeling that IS officers just sit on the table and kind of make a policy in vacuum, which is not true. She just happened to be in a Department of Women and Child Development, and she was looking after CSWB, where they had commissioned a social work research on prostitutes in Delhi, and she decided, and she was told that why don't you put together a sort of a roadmap on what needs to get done based upon the research. So rather than depending only on the research and having a few meetings, she decided to go to the spot and find out what is it that these women really need and what is it that they require. What is it? Why are they there? So a deep transformation took place in Bhamati's life the first day she visited a brothel in Delhi. She was both shocked and depressed at what she saw. The young ones looked bewildered and sad and said little as she tried to interact with them. Some of the girls informed her that they were graduates and had been lured into the premises with the job promise of a job. A few were clearly married and wore long Mangal Sutras, string black beads signifying their marital status. Mahamati could not comprehend why they wanted to celebrate a marriage, which was in fact the very reason they were in the brothel. She turned to a woman who said she was 25, but looked haggard, not 25, looked haggard and had aged much before her time. You say your husband sold you to a human trafficker, and that is how you're here. So why are you wearing a Mangal Sutra? In the memory of a man who married you only to sell you to the very next day. She received no answer except a resigned nod. An older woman responded on behalf of the young girl. What to do? This is our kismet. Uh, what really hit her was this young girl, uh, the strongest feeling in the cauldron of emotions was evoked. Uh, it evoked a feeling of rage. She saw a large number of minor girls who should have actually been at school, but for the scourge of human trafficking. How can anyone put minor girls through this? Some of these young girls are mere children, she thought, and she could not help sleep that night. It began with this. It began with this kind of sensitization, and it never left her. She's retired, but she still continues to work with trafficked children. Since I'm also currently, working with children in that space and trying to find safe spaces for them, I get to hear from her. She keeps asking, who can I help? How can I help? So on and so forth. But the lasting thing she did was when she was in MHA, and that's when a pilot project of anti human trafficking units was started with the World Bank assistance, and is now across every state. It is an AHTU is a compulsory thing to have to ensure that children do not get trafficked, women do not get trafficked. Another lasting thing that really happened was that this uh, when people from across the border, especially Nepal and Bangladesh, get trafficked into larger metropolitan towns, the law required for them to also be punished under the Immigration Act, because they did not have their papers. So it was like a double jeopardy.
Yeah.
So just uh, she then initiated this process of ensuring that once
And
a
there were
girl,
actually victims being, yeah. So,
yeah, so once the girl is proved to be a victim of trafficking, then she should not be prosecuted under the immigration laws. And that has helped so many people who've been rescued from trafficking to go back to their homes. Otherwise, they were relinquishing, they were lying without any future in these Nari Niketans and other sort of places where there was no future. So, you
I
know,
think it's a very important point, Rajni, that this is precisely what civil servants can do, and they're in a position where we can make some differences. There are some questions on the WhatsApp which I'll share with you, and then you can respond. But Durga, would you like to ask some questions of Rajni? Uh, you will give you the next 2 3 minutes to ask some questions from her, some questions from me if you have some, and then there are three questions which I'll pose to both of you, which have come on the WhatsApp chat box.
And I would like to ask, sir, to both of you that, since women's stories have not been told that deeply in the past, and now ma'am has taken this initiative and it's received a lot of appreciation. So, how do women officers in particular, how do they support each other in terms of their actions, in terms of whatever they are going through, like that balance of life concept. It's rather difficult to multitask, although it comes naturally to us. But what advice would you give to women officers as to be more balanced in life, to look after not only their career but their themselves? Everything gets mixed up, and it's the woman officer which comes at the end of the fulcrum. She has the career, the office, the family, and when it comes to looking after her own self, it comes, I think, in the end. So how do we support each other, support each other's cause, and be a more resilient that ways?
Sanjeev, is that to you? Yeah.
No, you answer it first.
Okay, so undoubtedly, as I said, the work-life balance is tough for anybody with a career like the kind that we've had. All three of us have had. It is tough, and tougher for a woman, especially when your children are younger and they're in that growing up stage. Because as you would know, they fighting for the time that is required elsewhere, and that is also important. We've all find our own kind of manner of balancing both. uh, as long as there's clarity in your mind that your job, your work is something that is extremely important, but then so is the family. So you need to give yourself to both. I think the only thing that you suffer from at the end of it is that you have little for yourself. You have very little time for yourself, you have very little space for yourself. And once you're willing to do it, then I think it becomes easy. Because I've actually done stuff like, if my children needed to read, or just spend time with me, and I have to go and do a Girdavari inspection, I'll carry them with me in the car, chat in the car, read to them in the car. They'll and allow them to play with the village children, run around, go on camel cart rides, etc., and have chane, hara chane, and all that, while I do my Girdavari inspection. So you need to find that balance, and you find it. You actually do find it. The only thing is that for yourself, I agree. I mean, there is just finite 24 hours a day. You do have less time there. As for uh, women supporting women, I don't know. I think each one of us supports the other. If you genuinely believe in the ideal and what the person is doing, you kind of support each other, whether you're senior. I've had a lot of support across all batches, across all cadres, uh, at all points of time, all points of time. However, there are occasions when you're just on your own, and that's the time you have to act like chalo. You have to actually walk that path alone.
Um,
So,
yes, you see, I think Rajni has made the point But the thing about Ekla Chalo is that the first line of Ekla Chalo is Jadi Tor Dak
Or
Shune.
Dakshare kyun na ashe. Yeah.
So,
It,
first effort is to take everyone along. And
absolutely.
in many cases, we'll be able to take people along. And let me tell you that, it's my experience also that, you know, if we can connect with the people, I mean, if we can connect with our office staff, we can connect with the people we are working for, that is infinite power. Your power, of course, comes from the statute. There is a power that you get when you are empowered under the CRPC, you are empowered under this and that. But there's a great empowerment when you can connect. And one more thing which I thought is certainly there. I mean, grandparents. Fortunately for us in India, the parents come to the rescue, which is not there in the West at all. So I think in India, work-life balance is at least for the next 2 or 3 generations is going to work out well because we still have a lot of support from both sides of I mean both sets of grandparents are there to help the children grow up and cope up. So a lot of time our parents are visiting us and summer vacations and many things. So there are many great advantages of still being in India. We still not reached that absolutely nuclear stage which you find. I mean because whenever the time when has been abroad, I mean there single parenting is a real challenge because that larger family support which we have and which we take for granted, India is not there. Okay, there are three questions that have come up. One is to Durga, that are you also planning to write your story? I know that Durga has already written on being a mom, but there's a question on, are you planning to write your story, Durga? And then there's a question about to Rajni, how long has it taken for you to write this? Of course, she did mention that it's taken her 2 COVID years, and something more about the sequel. So, Rajni, two questions to you and one to Durga, and then we'll have to close because there are only 60 minutes in a program. Yes, Rajni.
Oh, me first. So, one was about how long did it take me? It took
Take you.
me, well, the research took about, putting the word out and asking for people to respond was about a month. Research took about 3 months. And the actual writing was, wow, it just flowed. But I was, honestly, I was living each person's life. So when I was writing about Durga, I was Durga. I was a little Durga who ran on the Goa beach. And when I was like Anita Kaul, I would actually think and dream and feel like her Varnalikali. So you need to actually get into the thing. I also want to tell you that Penguin has already sold the rights to to somebody who wants to do go on the OTT platform and do a uh, either a movie or a serial, which is I think he's looking at that, but
Oh, so
should be.
Durga, you are going to give competition, huh?
So yeah, so there will be not just Durga, there'll be other people also who want. They've kind of picked up a
No,
couple of
but
stories they
but
want to do.
everyone's better half is not into OTT. So Durga is going to have a
I
real
know.
competition to.
I think Sir Abhishek can play the screen Durga's husband's role to balance
Uh,
out the competition.
there's a competition, yes. I mean, he may not like it if someone else plays that role. Okay.
Okay,
Yes.
and about the sequels, well, I'm still in the process of putting together the second one. That is getting more stories in that. I mean, that the first month. Um, to yeah.
Right. Right. Durga, the question to you was, when are you planning to write your Shakti story?
Thank you for the question, sir. I've been thinking of writing in between. Before the COVID, I had thought of writing, and then somebody also thought of making a biopic, and then the script also got ready during the COVID years. So, but the movie, the production is yet to start. So I don't know if the production starts, then maybe the book can be timed along with the release of the movie. And if it gets delayed, then maybe I'll write the book much sooner. I've been thinking of
Well, here
writing,
we
but
are.
then
Here we are. So what a fascinating story. And so thank you very much. I think it's been a real pleasure interacting with both of you, and also hearing about these absolutely fantastic 10 stories of extraordinary women who made a major difference, not just to their lives, but to the overall governance picture. Before we close, Rajni, what are the positive changes that you see in the 3.5 decades of your service life? I mean, what are the positive structural changes that you see have taken place in your service career?
So, in terms of structure, one is of course, I think there are more and more women coming in. That's one, and get acceptance is the other. Till the year 1996, for 30 years, 30 long years, Haryana did not have a single woman collector, and now that's a given. It's just happening. So a lot of roads are opening up there. Technology is playing a major role as far as governance is concerned. Governance is getting more process driven. It was not so process driven earlier, and people who are capable of putting together standard operating procedures and working alongside are doing fairly well. Um, uh, I think related to this is also the fact that what was earlier a regulatory kind of role, where regulation and land records and other things took a lot of your time and your effort, is getting a little, put in the back burner. They're there, but development has become more center stage. Center stage development, the person, the people that you meet, and every life that you're able to touch is what is important and makes sense. um, I think with that, I also want to, just before I end, mention my new book, which was out. It's called The Guru. It's Guru Nanak Sakhis, as told to me when I was a child, which have been recorded. Actually, they've been told over the last 550 years in the oral tradition, from one generation to the other. I've kind of recorded them, put them together in a book called The Guru Nanak Sakhis, and
It's a
I hope.
fascinating book. I've read this book also, and I must say that actually, as long as Rajni was a colleague. I mean, and before her cerebral, outpourings, we now with her cerebral outpourings, the respect for Rajni has gone up 2 notches. Because this Guru book is a fantastic book because it sort of connects
It's
to
a beautiful
anyone
read.
who's grown up in Punjab. Because the legend of Nanak
So,
is a legend with which so many of us have grown up, and also shows how he was. It's a fantastic story. So we shouldn't give away too much from that book because we want people to read. So Durga, do you also notice changes in the last 10 years that you've been in service?
definitely, sir. I think when I joined in, there wasn't so much of demand for speed. Now everybody has very high flying expectations. Everything needs to be done very quickly, and that too without compromising on efficiency. I think we've been able to reorient ourselves to quite an extent to deliver much faster, and yet not compromise on the fundamentals. And technology
You see,
definitely has a big role.
I think the point is very clear that India itself is changing. We are no longer an agrarian economy. I mean, the agriculture is very important, RD is very important, but we are making that transition. We are making that transition from being a developing nation to a nation which is almost there, which is nearly there. So with this,
Yes.
and certainly, India cannot become a $5 trillion economy. India cannot become a modern economy unless 50% of India, I mean, the workforce of India, unless it becomes more inclusive, unless it becomes more empowered. And I think books like this, Women of Influence, it's going to be very, very significant for all the girls who are out there in school, for all the parents who have to inspire their children. It just shows that women of influence, or for that matter, men of influence, are not born elsewhere. I mean, we are all products of this very environment, and with hard work, with with patience, and with blessings, we can all work together to make a much better India. Thank you so much, Rajni. Thank you, Durga. Thank you,
Thank you,
Technopack.
sir.
Thank you,
Thank you.
NDLI. Thank you to all our listeners and viewers for joining us on this program. We see
A
you again.
pleasure. Thank
Uh,
you so much, Sanjeev. Thanks, Durga. Thanks, everybody out there.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.